I want to give you just a little bit of context for how you're here, why you're here. If you don't know, Creators in Coffee is really rooted in Hildegard College, but it's a part of this ecosystem. So Buenas Coffee is provided the coffee this morning. They're on the other side of the building. We've got Fieldwork, our shared workspace, which is available to you. Let's go back to the Hildegard slide really quick. So Hildegard College is the world's first college that offers a bachelor's degree with a single degree program with an emphasis in both the liberal arts and entrepreneurship. So we talk about thinking deeply and really immersing ourselves in the abiding wisdom of history's greatest thinkers, and at the same time not settling for that deep philosophy, but rather transitioning that to how can we make good in the world? How can we practice what we are learning from this wisdom and turn that into real practical hands-on solutions to critical challenges that are emerging in the world as a result of changes in technology and culture and how we're just forming as humans. And so Hildegard students, there are 4 of them in the back, typical college students sitting in the back row. They are immersed in the Foundations of Thought program, where they are reading Aristotle and Euclid and Plato and all the classics, and then they are also in an entrepreneur lab. And so this gathering is really rooted in the entrepreneur lab because we want to bring together creators like all of you, I assume are, or aspiring creators, people who have ideas, who are thinking, oh, there's a problem that I am observing in the world that I'm particularly connected to, that I want to help solve. And we want to equip you and empower in communities to do that, and then also programmatically to do that. And so if you scan the QR code, you'll receive, you can sign up to receive a Friday email that contains stories of what we're doing in the Hildegard community and ways to get connected in. If you're interested in any of that, I would invite you just to come talk to me or one of our undergraduate students. They can tell you about the program as well. Or Rachel, who checked you in. She's our community development lead, and she can help you out as well. Fieldwork is the workspace you're in. So if you are here today and you brought a laptop, or even if you didn't, you are invited to co-work for free for the day. Just check in with Eli, who's back at the soundboard here, and he will get you set up for the day. Anytime we do a Creators in Coffee, co-working at Fieldwork is free for the day. We'd love to build community with you, so stick around with that. We also have these packages if you want to scan the QR code and become a member and become more of a consistent part of our ecosystem and community. Love for you to do that as well. So now we're going to get into our conversation for today. So we're going to get into what is the good, that question, with our guest, Kohl Crecelius. I'm going to let him do more of the full intro of himself and his journey and his path. Kohl and I have known each other probably for a little over a decade at this point, when he was founding Crochet Kids International, and that's turned into Known Supply. And we've been sort of in similar social impact, social entrepreneur space, where we're seeking to form community and answer questions and then solve critical challenges that are existing in the world. His happens to be around supply chain in the clothing industry and making sure that that is redemptive. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what redemptive means in the context of the good. So would you welcome with me Kohl Crecelius?
I just saw that you give free drip coffee.
Oh yeah.
To be a part of the co-working space.
Thanks for noting that huge value add.
That's insane.
If you are a member, you get to go grab a mug and take it into Buenas.
Because like, Creators in Coffee is cool, but you kind of had me at the coffee part. I love coffee, so you'll be seeing me back.
All right, good. We've got 1 membership sold right away. Okay. Kohl's now a part of the community. You can see him any day here.
I will get my money's worth.
Let's start out, Kohl, talking about your origin story, your formation story as a founder, a social entrepreneur. We'll unpack that a little bit more later, but give us the, I know, very brief history of Crochet Kids, Known Supply, how you got involved in that, and where that's taken you over your journey.
Yeah, we got a really early start in this sort of, finding this intersection between social impact and business. And it started in a very sort of odd roundabout way, but it was a combination of a couple things. One of those things was that we had some early opportunities to travel internationally with our churches and community groups to volunteer in developing countries around the world. at a pretty young age, like just out of high school. And when I say we, it's me and some friends that I grew up with back in Spokane, Washington, 509, shout out. So we had this baseline of like, wow, there's a lot of need in the world. Oh my goodness, so much more than we even had an understanding for growing up in the inland Northwest. And then we also were skiers and snowboarders, and we knew how to crochet our own beanies. So it originally funded our high school prom endeavors, which was insane. There was hot air balloon rides. There was a roller skating rink rented out for our friends. It was nuts. But then we realized this was a tool that was very simple and that could be applied to job creation. We started in 2007 teaching women to crochet, and that led us down this whole journey of starting a brand called Crochet Kids that had success in retail stores and all sorts of stuff that led us into learning more about fashion in general. There was so much more that was broken about that industry than we even knew. And so we've kept sort of following this thread further and further along to say, how can we not only make a difference in the lives of the people who make our products, but how can we change the narrative of fashion? How can we change a customer's relationship with their clothing? And that is a really big question. But that's where we're at. It's like that's the change that we want to see.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, and then I want to go to the transition from Crochet Kids to Known Supply.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the question that's orienting us this morning. What is the good? What does that look like? Or maybe how has that question impacted how you have gone through or started your journey kind of in the first phase? And if we want to pull up the redemptive frame, Eli, we can do that and kind of use that as a basis for talking about this too.
Yeah, so I think a couple things when we talk about what is the good. I think when you take that at face value, there's this notion that's like, what is like something good that I can do? And I think for us, when that started with our journey, was like, we want to give jobs to people in a region of the world who otherwise don't have any economic opportunities. And it started there. But as I said, as we continued to like follow that thread and understand like what more good we could do, it started to change how we thought about our impact, right? And it was a lot different than, these communities that we were directly involved in, and we said, this is just one community. Like, how do we change the bigger story, right? Like, how do we help a shopper understand the impact of their purchase, no matter what they're purchasing, right? And this frame is a helpful way of thinking about it, because this is something that's borrowed from our friends at Praxis. They're an incredible faith-based think tank about like, they're sort of at the edge of thinking about like, how do we take our values and principles that we say we believe and put them into action through our lives and vocation, right? And they break it down into these three phases: exploitative, ethical, and redemptive. Exploitative needs no, discussion. We all understand what it means for businesses to be exploitative. Ethical is this idea where I think most people land when they talk about good. And it's saying, in our case, it would have ended with that. Like, how do we provide living wage employment to these people and sell products and just do that again and again and again? And that's great. That's nothing to like. I think most industries, businesses, people, like getting to ethical is like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's important. We want to get people there.
But I think when we think about a business in a sense, like what more could it do? How do we go beyond ethical into redeeming the story around not only how products are made, but how we interact with them? Like, that is such a bigger challenge to take on, and it's something that involves so many more people. It involves an entire sort of ecosystem of folks to like make that happen. And it's a challenge. It's almost like a call to action of like, okay, what's beyond? Like, how can we go further? And that's been a part of our story.
Can you give an example of moving from the merely ethical to redemptive in your early work with Crochet Kids in Uganda? You were doing great work there, employing women. What did you notice that caused you to move from that ethical work into more of a comprehensive view of redemptive?
I would say two things. One, on the sort of at the ground level, initially it was about job, employment, fair wage employment, providing living wages to people who otherwise wouldn't have any sort of economic upward mobility. But very quickly we realized that if we were only providing the economic piece, that would only go so far for the individuals in the communities we were working in. So we added in a mentorship program. We added in education for financial literacy and things that allowed people to not only have this job, but our ultimate goal was at that point to graduate them out of this need, even for the job that we provided, into their own entrepreneurial endeavors, the things that they sought for in their life, that they wanted to accomplish above and beyond what we could provide in a job, things that were locally contextual to their work. So that was one piece of this idea of like, okay, if we're going to talk about economic empowerment, it can't be singular. It has to be robust. The other piece of it though is this like broader conversation that I've mentioned to ask the question, how do we take this conversation of, how clothing's made, and how do we start to change hearts and minds of people who are shopping and how they think about their clothing? So the thing that we did very early on, we started in 2007, probably in 2008 or 9, we started to have every person who made one of our items sign a tag that was then sewn into every piece that we made. And then we built out a profile for the person who's for every single one of our makers, so that when I, as a shopper, bought one of these items, I could go online and I could learn the story of the person who made that item, right? We wanted to ground these issues of poverty alleviation, of exploitation, or what the opposite looks like. We want to root them in human stories, right? And so that's something that we carry on to this day. Every single one of our products has a signature, has a human story attached to it, so that it starts that conversation for anyone who buys one of our products to think about like the human impacts of what they buy and what it could look like if we thought about it, and if we, a little bit more mindfully, we're purchasing items that were making a positive impact.
Yeah. And that's the brand, Known Supply, is really the next iteration of that, where you identified the value in knowing who made it, and then said, oh, we want to build this new brand around it. Can you talk about the shift from Crochet Kids International to Known Supply?
Yeah.
Maybe on two fronts. One, just from that brand perspective and seeing things more redemptively, and the known part of that. And then also, maybe after that, we can get into more of the nonprofit to for-profit switch, because I think that would be particularly intriguing for some people here who are thinking about good ideas and entity formation and like, which one should I choose? And I don't understand why.
So that like the part of our story that was consistent was this like human piece, right? Like it was always the fact that you could know who made your product, even with Crochet Kids. There was a few problems with Crochet Kids. One, no one knows how to pronounce crochet. The Crotchet Kids was like, that's a little brutal. That was tough. The kids, like, is this children's clothing? Do kids make the clothing? We're like, hold right there. And just in general, we started to, we had a lot of, amazing opportunities and success with that brand, but there was a bigger story that was like welling up underneath the surface. And, one of the greatest unlocks for starting Known Supply and transitioning away from Crochet Kids was this idea where people started to come to us and say, hey, will you make something for us? We want t-shirts, and we had started a second location in Peru, and we were making cut and sew apparel and hoodies and all sorts of stuff in apparel. And so people were coming to us and saying, hey, will you make this? Will you make that? And there was this realization that came for us where it was like, we as a social impact brand, and this is true for all social impact brands, where like the thing that you do to make that impact is your unique differentiator. What happens is in any business school, except for maybe Hildegard, in any business school, it's like, what are you told to do with your unique differentiator? You were told to own that, to hold that to yourself. That is your thing. Do not let anyone else encroach on the thing that is unique about your business, right? Like, own that. The problem is when that thing is your mission, is your social impact, you tie that, you limit the reach that can have, because it can only be as big as your individual brand can be, right? And so with Known Supply, we had this hunch and we said, what if it's not about us? What if it's not about what we can build, how big our individual brand can be? What if there's all sorts of people out there that can, that care about this mission of celebrating makers and providing fair wage employment? What if we essentially became the engine to power their efforts through custom merchandise, the things that we know best? How can we help them do the things that help them live into the brands that they're trying to build with merchandise that we can provide, right? One of our first ones was this event in New York called the Global Citizen Festival. I hope I still have the t-shirt, because we literally were making t-shirts for this festival. It's a huge festival in New York, focused on poverty alleviation, and we made t-shirts for Rihanna for this festival, and I was just like, I've arrived. This is amazing. I'm so happy, right? And so we've continued down this path, and that's another expression of this idea of redemptive. And these are not new ideas. Like the idea for me came from Elon Musk, of all places, where he was sort of running up against this battle with growing the EV market, how do electronic vehicles, how do we get them going? There wasn't the infrastructure, there wasn't enough options out there. And so what did he do? He gave his patents away so that more people would start making electronic vehicles, and then there would be more infrastructure so that, the industry as a whole would lift, right? And that was our thought with ethical apparel, was like, okay, there's all these brands that are starting, and it's kind of interesting. Everyone's trying to do everything on their own, and they're trying to, safeguard the way that they do their social impact and the way that they make their stuff as unique. What if we just gave that away? What if we said our mission is so much bigger? If we could sell 10 times the amount of product because we're making custom merchandise for all these other groups, how many more people could we employ in that process? How much further would that message of meeting the person who made your product reach through all these different avenues? So that was the Known Supply unlock for us.
What I love about that is that you're talking about changing culture ultimately, right? And that's the idea of being free with it and having an abundance mentality and saying, hey, in order to do what we want to do missionally, we've got to hold this as a mission first organization.
Yeah.
And let's do what we need to do in order to change the culture so that mission is more likely to be achieved by a number of other organizations as well as us.
100%.
We were at a dinner a couple nights ago, and one of our table guests, Heather, was talking about being going through a master's program in social entrepreneurship 10 years ago. And like Crochet Kids and 31 Bits were like the Tom's Shoes, kind of the models of social entrepreneurship.
Right.
And we were talking a little bit about the shift in culture around social entrepreneurship, social impact, social good, all these terms that were kind of like being formed and codified in that era.
Yeah.
You recently started a Substack called No One Builds Alone.
Mm-hmm.
And talked about social entrepreneurship is dead, right? Kind of a controversial statement, but that's a cultural movement, right? So could you unpack that for us and then kind of relate that to the shift that you were talking about from this like, oh, we want to exist to change culture from an abundance mentality?
Yeah, of course. I think that so we're like going up on 20 years of doing this work, and we've seen a lot of people, a lot of iterations of like social impact in business happening, especially but not limited to like the fashion space. I think in a lot of ways, the idea, the original concept of the social entrepreneur, you think of, the 2010s of like the Tom's Shoes of the world, this like big explosion of brands, some with a lot of success. I think if anything, they were a little too successful in what they awakened in sort of business at large, which is this idea that purpose can not only be something that is meaningful to a business and to a mission, but it can also have business success. And so as a result, what happened is, if you look around today, I say social entrepreneurship's dead, because if you look around almost any business, if you read any business's website, they have a social purpose. Like, it's almost an expectation, right? That it's like you have a purpose, and whether they did or not previously, they all have a more clearly stated one today. And whether they execute against those social purposes or whether they're nice words on a page is also really hard to dissect, right? But the idea is that everybody has a social purpose, and so the idea of social entrepreneurism, at one point where it used to be like, these are the companies for good and these are the companies not for good, clearly. There's a line in the sand, and we all know which line these ones fall on, right? That's really no longer the case. And, I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that, there's a lot to be said that I believe that we're in a net better position as like a society and a culture. I think the onus for those of us that really want to have a social impact and purpose that is meaningful, I think that there's more that we have to do to sort of prove that today than we did previously. I think that previously it was as simple as saying, hey, yeah, this is our mission, this is how we're doing it, come support. I think that there's a lot more onus on brands to look towards verification of the claims that they make, of certifications they can use, third-party people that they can work alongside that can help prove the impacts that they are having. And I think ultimately what's created as a result is again, I keep coming back to this word of an ecosystem, maybe because you said it earlier with fieldwork, right? But it's like, it does have to be this ecosystem of a collective of people that are all trying to create an impact together. I think the other death that happened in social entrepreneurship, what we saw was so many of these brands, ourselves included, tried to take on the work of 5 organizations to
Yeah.
to accomplish their mission, to accomplish their impact. We at Crochet Kids, we were a nonprofit, so we were fundraising money to provide all these additional social impact programs. We were also a product manufacturer, running our own production facilities. We were also a brand, designing, marketing, and selling products. We were all of these things.
You were self-certifying you're good.
We were self-certifying, and there was beauty in that, to a certain degree, but it was just like over time and with scale, it was like these things can't all happen well. And so we had to have sort of a man in the mirror moment, my business partner Travis and I, and just like ask ourselves that question of like, okay, what are we good at? What do we know the best? What do we want to lean into? And how do we find partners and friends and others to like help build up the other areas of our business that we need?
Yeah. At Hildegard, we talk about that, the question, what can you be best in the world at? It's like Jim Collins' good to great model and his hedgehog principle. Or what's your zone of genius if you're kind of an individual founder, solopreneur? How would you describe that for Known Supply? Like, what are you best in the world at today as a result of going through this process?
Yeah, zone of genius is pretty strong for us, but
You can claim it.
claim it. No, so it came down to a couple things, right? For us, and us is myself and my business partner Travis, who Jeff knows well. We're like, what ultimately are we good at, right? Because we'd been in this fashion space for over 10 years up to this point, and we knew fashion and we knew all of that, but we knew that we as a unit, as a team, we were not the people who cared deeply about fashion for the sake of fashion, right? Like fashion has always been a tool to engage in like a culturally relevant conversation, and as far as I can tell, everybody still needs to wear clothes. So it seemed like a good thing to engage everyone in a conversation with, right? And so the things that we ultimately stripped down to was we love partnering and working with people. Like we loved just the act of like, we loved, helping create things with people. Like that is so fun for us and we're really good at it. We like people. So that was one thing, is like we loved working with people and helping them further a mission that they cared about and that we deeply cared about, right? It was like, we knew we could do that for them. And then ultimately we were really good at understanding how to make great product in an ethical way. Like we had cut our teeth doing that, building our own production facilities from the ground up. And so we knew what it would take. We knew the process. We knew what it would mean to have a team around us that would create really great product. But not only for ourselves, like we knew we could create product and stand behind that product for these partners of ours. And so it came down to those two things. And then the other thing that I think is important about our journey is like, we didn't, I think a lot of times in business, it's always like, there's this genius behind, the Wizard of Oz, behind the veil of this brand who's like saying, pulling the strings and like has a super clear direction. This is the thing that we're marching toward and we're going for it. And, we have our blinders on and we're accomplishing that. I think it's important to note that when we started Known Supply, we were like, okay, there's about 5 directions this could go in. And we don't know which one's gonna win, but we're gonna kind of like put all of the feelers out there. We had this custom merchandise piece. We still do this seasonal fashion. We work with, we have an e-com store. We work with a bunch of retailers, Anthropologie, Whole Foods, REI, Nordstrom. So we do this seasonal fashion thing. Then we've also started other brands. So now Crochet Kids is a brand under Known Supply. We have another women's brand under Known Supply. And then we, at one point we were like, do we start our own verification tool? Do we become the collaborator to help all of these other, brands, not like not like the custom merchandise stuff we do, like Levi's and Nike and these folks. Do we help them get into ethical fashion? So we put like all these feelers out, and then over time we've been really astute at like helping the market, helping our business tell us what's most interesting about what we do. We try not to take too many guesses, or we try not to take too many hard lines to say like, this is absolutely it. And I think that as entrepreneurs, we have taken those stands before, and we've like went gung-ho down a certain direction and been like, yikes, we shouldn't have done that. That was a lot of effort and resource and whatever, and like, So there's been a process of like whittling down to the things that we do best at, but it continues to get more clear each day.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me and just kind of this thread is this idea of the hero founder fallacy.
Yeah.
And how, I mean, you wrote about that recently too,
Yeah.
and just how no one builds alone. We've got to get rid of this like lone wolf hero celebrity founder fallacy in our culture in general, and recognize that we all need each other. We need spaces like this. We need to be in community. We need exposure to people who are not just sitting on a stage, but who are just in community together, sharing stories, navigating challenges together. So I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This went really fast. We are going to have an extended Q&R with Kohl, with the Hildegard students. That's part of the Entrepreneur Lab offering for about the next half hour, 45 minutes. Cool. And I think the best way probably just to continue this conversation, we'll have you back at some point if you're willing to come back and just continue, because this has been really great, but it feels like we've just kind of gotten to the surface of a lot of really important conversations that we need to have. So I would encourage you, No One Builds Alone on Substack. Yep. And you've been writing there for about...
I'm coming back, guys. I used to have a blog and used to do some stuff, but I'm trying to explore these ideas of like, what you said about, the hero founder complex. I'm trying to break that stuff down, because what I read, all the business books I read for the first decade of my work and everything that I did, I say I was cosplaying what I thought a leader should be. And it was very detrimental to me personally, to my organization for sure. And so, so this idea of like, how do we build collectively and understand how we surround ourselves with the people we need to grow the things we want to grow in a meaningful way. No One Builds Alone. That's on Instagram, Substack. Chime in.
Follow along. That's where you get to ask your questions, because we didn't have time for that today. So comment your questions. He'll interact with you there. Thanks for being here, Kohl. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.